Hey, welcome back to Author Nation. We're here at NINC in St. Pete's Beach and got the opportunity to interview a legend. At least a legend in his own mind.
Definitely so.
But Dirty Secret, one of the few authors that the Solari family listened to on a regular basis.
And I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. So Franklin Horton, how are you? Welcome, welcome to the Secret Lair.
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So you've been coming to NINC for how long?
Since 2017.
I think one of the signs of the apocalypse is you not showing up at a conference. You're a little bit of a conference.
Yeah, which meant Vegas last year was almost the apocalypse.
Almost. Yeah. That was scary because I had a Franklin Horton sighting early in the wild and then gone.
Yeah, I was caught by the flu bug, and so I hid out in my room to be polite to the other people and not make them all sick. But yeah, this year I'm going to do better.
Yeah. Well, you've been very helpful this year. We'll get to that a little bit later. Let's let everybody know about who you are, what you're about, what the Franklin Horton brand is.
Well, I was a kid who always wanted to be a writer. That's all I've ever wanted to do. Was Stephen King obsessed as a child. So, I was reading about the time he started pumping out paperbacks, and I thought, this guy's like a rock star. Most of these authors are leather elbow patches people, but, this is a guy who drinks beer and snorts coke and writes books, and, he makes it seem like a more intellectual rock star kind of pursuit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was sucked in from the beginning. So I went to school as an English major.
You're an English major? I'm learning stuff already.
Yeah, English major, and actually graduated with an English degree, and wrote unsuccessfully for probably 25 years before I broke through as an indie. Wrote a lot and never sold anything.
Well, let's double click on that. When you say unsuccessfully, why do you consider it unsuccessful?
Well, everything you write is a learning experience,
Mm-hmm.
so that part was successful. But unsuccessful in that I was never able to get an agent,
Mm-hmm.
never able to get published, got rejected hundreds and hundreds of times. And I remember the very last rejection was from an agent who said, "You'll never sell 5,000 books, so it's not worth my time." Yeah.
Do you guys send them your Amazon rankings?
We're friends on Facebook, so I don't tag him, but I should tag him in every post.
Yeah, send him a Christmas card.
Yeah.
20% of X would have been.
Yeah, think about that.
Not that you're the kind of guy that would be bitter.
Oh, I'm totally the kind that would be bitter.
So it was more about the pathway to success.
Yeah, there are people who are born to write, I fully believe, and they're never content unless that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was always that. I got a typewriter when I was probably 13, which, a manual typewriter. Yeah. And I sat down and I wrote 3 pages every day, just kind of writing little tidbits about people I knew, conversations I had, interesting things that happened, because I knew that was collecting material that I might be able to use one day. And at this point, I have thousands and thousands of pages of these notes, and I still go back through them looking for weird place names or weird incidents that happened or character names or whatever. So, those roots paid off. They're still part of, what eventually happened, but part of the history.
Yeah. Well, the reason I know you go to too many conferences is because I go to too many conferences.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that you can say it's too many conferences, because for me, if you grew up in an area where you really weren't around other writers, this kind of fellowship and sharing and friendship is something that you never had before. Mm-hmm. So this is an opportunity to convene with your tribe and your people and share those stories that normal people don't understand.
True. Yeah.
So it's where we bond.
Yeah, totally get that. But where I was going with that was you've shared some of, because like I said, I'm a fan some of the origin stories of your books. And so outside of just the, like, you're writing these pages and understand, kind of coming up with this content, how is it that, your observation skills have developed? And, I'm one thing I've noticed about you is you're quiet and you're always observing.
Yeah, there are different reasons for that, but one of the things I learned early on, when you're talking to somebody who has an interesting background, particularly somebody who has a background they're not supposed to talk about, questions automatically shut them down. They respond instantly to questions by clamming up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let those people talk and tell their stories at their own pace, they will reveal things, and they will tell you stories that you can then, obfuscate the details and reuse. But
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people from really clandestine backgrounds, who share if you don't press them to share.
Mm-hmm.
And then among normal people too, who are not part of that shadowy world, everybody has interesting stories and crazy backgrounds that only come out when you allow them to unroll that. So I always listen and wait for people to spill those details.
Yeah.
Then I make note of them.
So when was it that you kind of, you say you've been doing this since you were a baby? When was it that you kind of honed in on what has become kind of your craft, is around thrillers and the post-apoc? I mean, some of it's not true post-apoc in the sense it gets a little more thriller action. Tell me about that.
Well, in 2011, I was one of those people who saw this as maybe the window to being able to do what you had always wanted to do. So I had 7 completed novels that I'd written during the period when nobody wanted to read them. So I learned how to format. I started to upload some of those novels to Amazon, but what I quickly realized was they were not what people with Kindles were reading. So over time, I started focusing on...
What were they? Like, what was the thing that you were like, this is going to be it?
Well, if you're an English major, the only thing you were allowed to talk about with the lights on was literary fiction. Genre was something you did on the weekends. When the school was closed, they would have these weekend seminars on science fiction or horror or whatever. But it's like you were supposed to wear a mask when you went, almost, and you weren't supposed to talk about it, when the week came back around, because even if you went to sign up for one of those, you got kind of this dismissive look from your advisor, like, really, you're going to go do that? So my first stuff was literary fiction, and it sucked. And there's good literary fiction, but I was not a writer of good literary fiction. So as those books kind of floundered there, I saw that I needed to tap into what I enjoyed reading, which was post-apocalyptic fiction. So I started looking at blogs that people like J.A. Conrath and Stephen Conkley and some other people had up, where they were detailing their publishing process. So I adhered to it. I reached out to people, and I found my editor, my cover people, and got it together. So it took me 2 years to write that first one, because I was writing on my lunch break. So I said, every day, if I can sit and do 3 pages at lunch, then I'll have a book eventually. So it took me about a year to pull that first one together and get it to an editor, and it came out in 2015, and it topped out in its genre, which kind of showed me, okay, there is a market here, and there are readers here, and I can reach those readers. So that was 34, 35 books ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's become an obsession, and I left my job, and I do this full time, and love it.
Yeah. And then you're in a situation where a lot of your revenue is not people reading these books, it's people listening.
Yeah, that's it's there are some genres and subgenres that audio just does particularly well. And I've had periods of time, entire years, where the audio income was double the Kindle sales and KU reads. And it's been like that this year. It's just been a really good year for people listening. And it's because you have a readership that is driving trucks, they're runners, they're military people who have repetitive jobs where they're using their hands, but their mind is free to wander. So those people love audio.
Yeah. Well, I know for us, like, it's when we do we like to do long drives, like 15-hour drive is like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm good with that too.
And that's when we'll turn those books on and just listen. And, there's times where you're in a car and you're talking and you're having a great conversation. There's times where it's like, we just need to drive and listen to a book. Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time.
I enjoy doing that too. So I try to write with a ear toward audio, toward creating a story that does not have particular details that you may have to refer back to, which is a key to writing good audio. You have to have, and you have to structure your dates in a way that a person is not having to look back and see, okay, what day did this happen? Everything has to be relative so you can listen in a stream and not have to refer back.
Well, I'll tell you, on this trip, which we were just dropping a kid off down at college, we're listening to Punching Tickets, and a particular character died. I'm not going to say anything. And it was a moment in the car.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some hate come my way sometimes because people...
you deserve it.
Yeah, people get attached to these characters, and that's what you want them to do. Yeah. But also kind of a theme, I think, of my books is that, being a trained, prepared person does not guarantee survival. You can be the most skilled combatant. You can be the most prepared survivalist, and you're still going to die if a bullet comes your way at the wrong moment. Yeah. So that's just kind of a key element of all those stories is you're going to lose good people. You're going to lose characters you care about.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, and I'm a pretty particular reader. There's a lot of people that it's like, right, you got me on that one. Right, so it worked. How long it took you to get there, but it was worth the pain and effort to get there.
Well, I appreciate that. I know when I make my narrator cry that I've really twisted the knife in the right way.
There you go. So let's talk about that a little bit. You've got a pretty interesting relationship with your narrator.
Yeah, if I had it to do over again, I'm not 100% sure I would have gone down the royalty share road. But the way it happened, Kevin Pierce, who is a dear friend of mine at this point, he is somebody I'd heard in other books that I'd listened to. Mm-hmm. And so I knew his voice, and he submitted not necessarily an audition, but an outreach email before I'd even got my first royalty check. And he's like, hey, I'm following your book. I've done post-apocalyptic before. I really enjoy it. I think I'm developing a post-apocalyptic readership. Would you like to partner on audio? So we did a royalty share agreement through ACX, and we've sold, I think it's 475,000 audiobooks together.
Wow, congratulations.
So, yeah, and we're good friends, and I think he has developed a voice for knowing how my writing is supposed to be interpreted. So we work well as a team.
That's great. It's great. And, interesting that he was kind of out there building his business that way, like scouting.
He's very proud of that because he wrote a post in one of the narrator groups on Facebook probably about this time last year because he had crossed that threshold of selling 2 million audiobooks. And he said, I've done this all with indies. This is not with traditional publishers. This is through my partnership with indies. And for anybody coming up who wants to be a narrator, don't think you have to get in with the big publishers to make this happen. Indies can build your career.
Yeah. I was, you introduced us and I had a long conversation with him. And it was interesting how he talked about working with indie authors, and then Jeff Hayes, the owner of Sound Booth Theater, they were like brothers from another mother. Like he had a similar kind of thing, where it's like apparently in the narrator world, it's like you use indies to build your base so that you can go to the big leagues with the trad pub, and they're both people that chose to like build their own business around their voice with working with indies. And
I think there are a lot more narrators out there like that than we know about, because there are some that I've spoken to in the past who are not even part of like the the ACX program or anything like that.
Mm.
These are narrators who just work through their relationships and through their own contracts with indie authors, and they work full time very successfully just doing indie books.
Mm. Yeah, it's cool. I think back to, so when I came around, and probably my big like baptism was the 2017 20 books, where I really understood what was going on. And my big observation is that I didn't know who there was going to be, but somebody was going to build like iconic intellectual property that was going to change pop culture and probably lead to generations of drug-addled grandchildren living off their trust fund. So to kind of be now seeing like these stories where people are not just authors making money, but narrators and people that like, and these are not jobs that you think about can be making a lot of money or are easy, to start seeing that there are these opportunities when you just start to shift your thinking and viewpoint a little bit.
Well, I've mentioned to you before that I've attended the BoucherCon conference twice, which is the World Mystery Writers Association, and it's probably 99.9% traditionally published authors. And in talking around the bars and at lunch with some very successful trad authors, it's shocking to find how many of them cannot make a living off their writing. Even with 30, 40, 50, 60 books out.
Wow.
Yeah, are not making enough money to cover what a lot of indies spend on ads every month. I'm dead serious.
I know you are. Yeah. Yeah. I've had those conversations with people.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times with me, it's like people come that are on the nonfiction side, say friends of friends, like, oh, I heard you're in publishing. I got this new book that's coming out. And I have to explain to them, like, on the day you launch your book, there's like 3,000 other books coming out that day. And some of them are guys like you that have massive email lists and thousands and thousands of pre-orders. And that's your competition.
Yeah, and people who have kind of watched Amazon enough to know and develop their little systems of like, I'm not a master launcher. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty shabby compared to some people because I wing it a lot. But I do have a devoted readership that is going to get that book as soon as it's out. And that's the key, is developing those readers who want to be part of the excitement of the launch.
Well, and I mean, all the stuff that I've discovered and work on says that that's the sustainable, more important approach, right? What Amazon really does with their algorithms isn't traffic related; it's more customer behavior related. So when they see your audience come in and buy those books, they're like, "Ooh, can we find more people like this that would be interested in this product?" And they show it to those people, right? That's the days of like when you first got started, where it's like push button, make money. I sent a Facebook ad. People like they just wanted something to read.
I miss those days.
Those were great days. I don't know if you saw the podcast where I had John Logston and Jerry Riddle on.
No.
So they both. I was in Raleigh, and they both lived in the area, and got them on. The name of the podcast was Old Dog No Tricks. We'll have to figure out what we're going to call this one. But anyhow, they were within a month of each other starting, and they were talking about like, yeah, it was a lot easier. There was that ability to do things and make mistakes you can't make now.
Yeah, and I consider Jerry to be a friend. He's not somebody I talk to a lot, but he's somebody that I've felt comfortable consulting at key points.
Yeah.
Because there is a point where you feel like, okay, what do I do next? Because I think I've almost exhausted everything I understand how to do. And he's one of those people who has enough of a global overall picture of this that he's been able to tell me, I think this is what you need to do next. And he was correct. Yeah. So I trust what he would tell you.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of circling back on the whole thing you were saying about the fellowship of conferences and going to these kind of events is you get to a certain level that like you're at, and it's just normal to be like, either things aren't working like they used to, or you feel like maybe you shouldn't keep doing that because maybe it's, you know, costing you audience. Like sometimes there's things you can do for short-term gains that just like, yeah, you can make money today, but it's going to not keep a long-term customer. I think that's one of the good things you can get out of like sitting around talking to people at these
100%, because you know, that same year that you talked about going to Author Nation, you know, I went to the Smarter Artist Summit in Austin, which
Yep.
was my first conference. And it's always surprising to me how many of my close author friends now are people that I met at that conference. And that was like this coming together of all these hungry writers who realized, you know, there was an opportunity here, not just business wise, but to, you know, meet the other people doing this and kind of put our heads together and develop a network of people that you could refer to. And I do that all the time. You know, I come to conferences early and, you know, relax and hang out, but it's because that's the opportunity that you get to sit with people uninterrupted and talk about what you're doing and exchange little tidbits of information that nobody is going to share in large gatherings.
Right, yeah. Sometimes by the time that big stuff comes out on stage, it's no longer effective.
Exactly. And those friendships come from conferences. I don't know that you can develop them the same online. You got to see each other and make a few bad decisions together.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, yeah, the interesting thing about you bringing up Smarter Artists is with the first Author Nation, we will be having Sean Platt and Johnny Truden at that show.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. That's full circle.
Yeah, and there's, at least in Johnny's situation where I've talked to him, there's a real serious reevaluation of some of the stuff that they was part of their success, right? The whole, you know, was it Write, Publish, Repeat?
Yeah,
was their big thing, which, you know, probably was one of those epic books like Chris Fox's Right to Market. You know, really got a lot of people into the industry, and he's not completely different mindset now with how he's going around customer acquisition.
Yeah, but you know, conferences and schools of thought like that, they're really they serve two purposes, which is one, the education they provide, but they also become kind of a hub of people coming together. So it's not just the material that's presented, but what you take away from that, both in terms of friendships and information and all that. So Smarter Artists was the same way. You know, I learned what was presented in sessions, but I also began building my own network. And Author Nation and Mink, all the conferences I've gone to are the same way. You know, you have the content that's presented in the sessions, but you also take away the network, the little bits of information, the people that you can message, you know, discreetly and say, okay, my ads are doing this. What did I screw up? Or, you know, I'm having trouble with this launch. What would you recommend? And you build that at conferences.
Yeah. All right. So this is going to be a touchy subject.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Am I going to cry?
You've got your emotion pillow if you need it.
Okay.
Okay. We're not going to use any names, but you might need a little time to think about it. So here's the question. You've been around a while. You've seen a lot of people that were super big deals, bigger deals than you. Okay. And they're
plenty of those.
Yeah. And they're no longer with us. What lessons have you secretly learned from watching these classic flameouts?
I think a lot of people began to believe their own marketing. They they see themselves as larger than they actually are. You know, I'm not a person who feels like I have a system to sell. You know, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm glad to share what I know. But I think that sometimes people get caught up in that I'm not really an author anymore. I'm a powerhouse, or I'm a figurehead, or I'm a mogul. And I think there is a risk inherent in that. Because then also, not just is there the risk of the fall, but there's a growing group of people who want to see you fall and enjoy your fall.
Yeah. Similar line. There's something where I was talking about last night with some authors. the idea of how you need to, and I'm interested in hearing how you do this, how you keep yourself up with the sophistication of your audience. So what I mean by this is like you're of an age where you probably remember the first Shogun.
Yeah.
And at the time it was award winning and made a bunch of money, and then there was the newest series on Netflix or Hulu. I don't know if you saw it, but it was amazing.
I didn't.
Yeah, it's crazy. Won all kinds of Emmys, right? Again, you go back and watch the old one, which you probably remember with Richard Chamberlain. Like,
yes.
It's laughable.
Yeah.
Right? But at the time, it was an amazing story and was sophisticated storytelling. But it didn't. It may not be that it. There's two ways to look at it. One is it didn't age well, or one is that the audience got more sophisticated. We want to hear more complex stories, or we just expect more. How are you thinking about that idea and your career path so that you do stay relevant?
I feel like my audience is complicated and maybe somewhat different than other audiences in that post-apocalyptic fiction has this real life tie-in to the prepper and survival community. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of those shows. Most of my signings are at prepper and survival shows. So there are people who read your books that expect realistic information. They want factual descriptions, and you can't screw up any details, whether it's, some military information, weapon information, survival technology, anything like that. But then there's also the audience of people who just like a good, engaging thriller story. So the thing for me is, how do I continue to satisfy both audiences and create a book that's going to appeal to even larger audience that I haven't brought in yet? And one of the ways I do that is, like you've read the Mad Mix series, but that's part of a universe that has other series within it. And each of those series takes on a different tone. So the Mad Mix appeals more to the military thriller, action thriller audience. But within that same fictional universe, you have the Borrowed World series, which applies to a more practical, survival-oriented audience. And then you have the Locker 9 series, which kind of appeals to both audiences, but in different ways. So I think rather than trying to shift my books to meet one particular audience, I try to write different series that, appeal to different groups. And through the success of those individual series, I can kind of decide where to put my attention and my focus.
Well, and since we're on that subject, you brought up your series, like, what made you think about building that world out? Like, what was going, like, when did you start doing that? And what's kind of the strategy behind?
Well, there's a lot of people at the time who were writing survival post-apocalyptic books about these electromagnetic pulses that just knocked out the power and technology instantly. But that seemed too easy for me. I wanted to write something about a society that there was a terror attack and things began disintegrating slowly. It's like the aftermath of a hurricane, except it's prolonged for years and years and years and years. So once I created that, and I spent all the time educating myself on cascading systems failures and, survival aftermath and all this, I didn't want to have to learn a new disaster. So I just basically took my one disaster and continued to spin off in different directions. And that worked well for me. Not only did it save me time because I already knew that world, but it brought in the readership who already liked one series and thought, well, I'll jump over to this other one. And I do lots of crossover characters, and Easter eggs for the readers where people meet up on the road or they encounter characters from other series, and readers like that. They like the surprise of it.
One other thing that you and I have talked about in the past is merchandising. And some of the stuff that you've done, like you brought us some cool swag, but also some of the stuff that you featured in books. So why don't you tell folks a little bit about your experiences around product placement and merch?
Well, it's interesting because some of the readers are very dedicated. they send, like when a new Mad Mick book comes out, people send me gifts because they enjoy the book. So, like I got a $250 bottle of scotch after the last one, and I get, aged Irish whiskey, and somebody made me a custom Mad Mick watch. I got a custom Mad Mick Glock as a gift. Yeah, with the Mad Mick engraved in it, my name engraved in it, all these custom features on it. And so I decided, that I was going to start featuring some products, and that developed some marketing relationships with companies who would then, if I featured their product, they would feature my books, and we cross promote like that. Mm-hmm. So it's the same as author cross promotion, except you're doing it with merchandisers, and the same kind of thing that people do now with influencers, except I've been doing it with merchandisers for about 7 or 8 years. And then that grew into, there's little features of each book that people like a lot. So I've developed a Shopify store and print on demand tie-ins to do t-shirts and hoodies and all that, and mugs and all the stuff they like. And that started small. It started as an experiment a couple of years ago to learn how to do it. And now it's a little thing that makes a couple of $1,000s a month. And it's not going to, make you super rich, but it's growing, and readers enjoy, because the thing is, if they like your world, they don't want your world to be limited to only experiencing it when they're reading the books. They want to carry it into their daily life. Yeah. So being able to do that with a shirt or a mug, to where they're sitting there drinking their coffee in the morning and they're thinking, I love the Mad Mick.
Yeah. I think that, like, the reality is you do not need another coffee cup. Like, you go to any house, might not be the right size, it might not be the color, but like, you certainly don't need to go buy another coffee cup. Why do people do that? Is just because of what you said, is they want to have in their real life some connection with these fictional characters or that story world, right? And it's that emotion, right? It's what they feel. Yeah. So that's such a powerful part of the business you're in. I think it gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, it's part of the world building. The world building isn't limited to the books, but it's how do you bring that world into people's real lives? Because for a lot of people, reading is escape from an unpleasant time in their lives, or from there are negative things in their life that they're trying to escape through reading. And if you can provide them with additional escapism by selling them a product that reminds them of the experience of reading your books, then that's a win for you and a win for them also.
Well, and I also think that this is something that's trending right now, because you and I are of an age where we remember where you could own a brand, in the sense of, like, if you were into a band, you had a concert t-shirt, you had the albums, right? Whereas with this onslaught of subscriptions, you're especially, like, my kids are learning, they don't own anything. Right? And things that they love may get just turned off on them.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's the other reason why people are, especially authors I know that are really leaning into the whole merchandising thing, are seeing success, is because they're not buying special edition books because they want to do anything else other than have that as a possession on their shelves.
Yeah, it's the same with any other kind of merchandise. You're just trying to allow more of your world to become more of their daily life. And I think a lot of people need that. A lot of people want that relationship with not just the author, but the world of the books.
That's for sure. Well, we've got lunch to get to.
Absolutely. I'm all for that.
Yeah. So why don't you tell folks where they can get some of that dope merchandise?
Yeah, so my website is franklinhorton.com. My merch store is resetroadhouse.com. And other than that, my books are on Audible and Amazon.
And they're awesome, so go listen to them.
Thank you.
All right. Good having you on the show, man.
Appreciate it.
All right. Bye.